Welcome to the Empowering Transformation series, How to Release Stress and Past Trauma, Have a Peaceful Mind, and the Power to Move Forward. So glad you are here with me. I've chosen to do this series so that you can get new insights to know how to handle stressful times. And I'm so excited to have Casey with us today. She has learned that the most important gift anyone can give themselves is to live through Christ's point of view. That's led her to some fantastic mountain peaks, as well as some dry, arid valleys. Through it all, she has learned to have faith and trust in God using the power of storytelling. Reflecting and sharing her story, as well as devotional time in God's Word, has led to divine revelation, healing, and freedom. The power of storytelling has propelled Casey to live on purpose and without fear. Casey speaks life to the dry places of our deferred hopes and dreams through her podcast called Being Eve. Her books, The Moral Code, and soon to be released, Being Eve in Adam's World. She has no intention of resting until every person realizes their true freedom of knowing who they are in Christ. People of value, intricately designed and made for more. Welcome, welcome, Casey. I'm so glad you are with us today.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for having me, Lori Kay. And I'm just so excited to be speaking to the hearts and minds of these beautiful people tuning in today.
Oh, and I've been getting teary on some of my interviews, but I'm so thankful that God has connected us together. It's through connections of other people that someone recommended that I reach out to you. And I'm just like, oh, yes, I want this sister. So I'm happy I found you.
Me too.
Can you reflect on one of your harder times and how you handled the stress of the situation as you tried to move forward?
Oh, yes. I think the pinnacle of one of the hardest times of my life was when my husband and I were going through a tumultuous time in our marriage. I got to a point in my life where I was upset, I was sad, I was depressed, I was mad at life, right? I didn't understand how I got to that point. And I just started blaming God for everything. I just started blaming him for everything that was going wrong. From the outside looking in, a person would perceive that I had it all together. I had a marriage, I had children, I had life, I had a home, I had the car, I had the degrees, I had everything that people tell you you should be happy about having and life should be good. But inside, I wasn't happy. Inside, I was very sad. Inside, I didn't know who I was. Inside, I didn't have an identity. I didn't have a solid foundation in my core. And so, therefore, I got to the point where life was very tough for me at that point. And I decided at that point I had to make a decision whether or not I was going to continue to be mad at life, at God, at everything that was going wrong, or I was going to do something about it. And that day, when I decided to do something about it, God met me in that moment, and it changed my life.
Wow. When you decided you were going to do something about it. Yeah, I believe God helps us, but we're also to do the actions.
Absolutely.
You know, that there's something that we need to be doing on our end.
Absolutely.
So what does a prayer look and sound like to you? How do you tell us about that?
Okay, so when I decided to do something about it, it started off with prayer. It was a very angry prayer. It was a very pointing in the finger in the air, like, you are not who you say you are. And all these anger and all the words of anger that was bottled up from within that I hadn't let out for years. And then slowly but surely, as he began to meet with me, because God meets us in our realness. When we are real with him, he is real with us. And he met me in that place, and he was kind, and he was comforting, and he was loving, but he was very real with me. And he began to show me me. That's when I began to see myself, my wrongdoing. I began to take responsibility for the things that I failed to do. So prayer is a conversation. Prayer is you just sitting down, talking with God, and He meeting you in that space. For me, as my relationship with Him began to progress, my relationship with Christ began to get formed. It became less angry, more loving, more kind, more question answer, right? It starts off sometimes with thanksgiving, thanking Him for the things that He's done, worshiping Him and adoring Him for who He is and the greatness of Him, right? The world, look at the world that He's created. Look at the sun, the moon, the stars. So I worship Him in those, in that time of prayer as well. There are times where I come as an attorney to the judge, where I'm like, hey, this is what your word says. Your word says this and this and this. So are you going to abide by that word? Are you going to do what your word says? So prayer can look very different. Sometimes it's just being still and quiet. There are times I say nothing. I come to Him as a daughter to a father, and I just lay on Him and rest with Him. And sometimes that looks like me just staying in place in time of meditation, laying down, listening to worship music and music that soothes my soul, and just stay there and be still and not say a word. So prayer can look very different. I recommend that everyone just come real and as they are when you pray. Don't look for fancy words, right? People think prayer is just fancy words and all these big words that you see in the Bible or whatever. Sometimes prayer is just you being you and saying, God, Dad, I need you in this moment. Help, SOS, whatever that looks like to you.
Yeah, not it doesn't have to be a scripted prayer, just from the heart.
Absolutely.
I have a couple examples from my life where I was a young mother, a new baby, and a 2-year-old, and my body was falling apart. And this was a time when I was living downwind from a hazardous plant waste. No, I always say that wrong. A cement plant that burned hazardous waste. And and so I was being dumped on every day, and my body was just struggling.
Wow.
And I couldn't touch things. I had rashes on my hands, and they looked like hamburger meat. And when I went to the doctors, they wanted to do cortisone shots, which
Right.
was fine, but it didn't feel right to me. And so they're like, don't be stressed and don't touch things. And they told me to wear cotton gloves. And so here I am trying to touch my children as little as possible, changing diapers in cotton gloves. And it was just so hard. And I got so angry at God. I mean, I was just, how dare you do this to me? And I was just like, rah. I was just like, it was just this pent up frustration of how
Right.
hard life was and how much pain I was in. It wasn't just my hands, I had pain everywhere. But after I was done yelling, I'm like, okay, I'll listen now. And I hear voices in my head. It's just my voice, but it's still a voice. And what I heard was, you chose this. And I'm like, whoa, 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 what? I did not choose this. I did not. And then he brought into my mind how he gave me some inspiration about not going on the birth control pill when I got married, but I wanted to finish my teaching degree so bad. I decided to pretend that I didn't hear that inspiration. I said, who's that going to hurt?
Right.
But that was the beginning of this trickle down of my ill health that got me to a place when I was in the harder. Anyway, it was just, I was amazed that even after yelling at him, he spoke kindly to me. And there were 2 other times where I was having a miscarriage, and I was so devastated, and I was crying, and all of a sudden I was just totally wrapped in the thickest blanket of love and comfort. And I actually was thankful for that hard experience because it gave me the opportunity to go to him in my sorrow and to say, comfort me. and to have that experience of being comforted.
Yes.
And then there's been the last time was when I was pregnant with my daughter. After this miscarriage, the doctor didn't give me my shot. I had the RH factor with my husband.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor didn't give me the shot. And here I'm pregnant again, and all of a sudden I realized, I didn't get the shot. I may abort this baby. And then, I was in panic, and I couldn't connect with my husband. He was out of town. And then all of a sudden, it was like it came into my heart as well as my mind. It was like, I told you when to have her. She has your blood type.
Right.
And all my boys, they don't have my blood type.
Wow.
And I was like, and just this calmness just went whoosh. And I'm like,
Covered you.
I know my baby's sex. She has my blood type.
That is the amazing part of God. That is just amazing.
And so it's just, we can turn to him in our panic and our sorrow and our anger. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
as real as we can be.
Yeah. My worst prayer was 6 months ago. It was, hey, you suck, the end. I mean, total disrespect. But that's where I was at. That's where I was at.
Right.
And that's a pretty disrespectful prayer.
I mean, it is, but he'll meet you right there in it because he already knows that that's how you feel.
That was I felt abandoned. I felt alone. It had been 2 years after my dad passed away, and it just opened up this can of worms of things that needed to be healed.
Right.
It was tough.
And that's the beauty of the real prayer with God, is it opens up where the healing needs to be and take place. As you just said that, just capturing that moment, that it opens up where you need to be healed. It will reveal it. The more real you are with him, the better.
Yeah. And I started going out to a tree and touching a tree, and I'm like, Christ and I are going to talk to this tree. I was like, I will connect to his creations. If I can't quite do a kneel down humble prayer.
Right. Let me just touch the tree. I love it. Oh my goodness.
So how do you know when you are getting guidance on specific action steps? I know for me, I'll think like, oh, this is the direction. And like, and it turns out like splat. Like,
even in those moments, so I'll talk about how I sense the direction from God. So it's funny, God talks to me with words. So, I mean, I can get a thought of a word, or in my reading, or if I'm watching a movie, there's a particular word that will stick out to me, and then he'll have me go research that word, and then boom, revelation would pop up and come as to what that word means to me and what he needs for me to do with that word. So with that, that's how I'm guided in my my doings and the things that he's asked for me to do, and how I pretty much proceed with everything that I do in life is that he gives me this word, which is amazing how it works in my life and with storytelling and the things that I do as a writer and an author. So when I hear the word, I just move forward. I don't think about what's going to go wrong. I don't think about any of that. I just be obedient to it and I move forward. Now, in the moving forward, there are times things doesn't pan out, right, the way you may think. Sometimes we think when God gives us a word, everything's going to be perfect, right? And listen, that is not so. That is not so, okay? That's not so.
I want the easy path with roses and rainbows.
Oh, that is not so. And I've learned that throughout the years. That is not so. So when he gives us a word, 9 times out of 10, or actually 10 times out of 10, there's going to be lessons in that journey that you go on.
Yes.
And those lessons are the bumps, the bruises, the hardships sometimes, the storms. All of that are the lessons that he uses to shape us and mold us for the destination that he's asking us to show up at. So I've learned to appreciate the journey. Yes. I've learned to accept the journey, because in the journey, there's the healing. In the journey is the lesson to teach me how to overcome a particular situation. in the journey where my marriage was in a tumultuous place, I've learned me. I learned who I am. I learned who I am in Him. I learned for the first time in my life who God was outside of religion, outside of what someone else said, Christ was, outside of what my mother, but I learned Him for me. And so it was in the journey that I learned everything that I am today. It's in the journey that Casey is even sitting right here with the beautiful Lori K. Coleman. So I recommend people to appreciate the journey, that even if there's hardship in the journey, appreciate it, learn to embrace it, because in that moment, you could just become the greatest person you were made to be.
And there's lessons that we do learn. I know when I lost the use of my hands, and what I learned was I have value because I exist, not because I do anything. And that was a hard lesson to learn. Right. I felt so sorry for my husband. I'm like, you got me, kid. Aren't you lucky? You got I'm so sorry for him. He was doing all the cooking. He was doing all the cleaning. It was so painful and hard. But that was the lesson, is that it is okay for me to be served. And then I have value.
And it's okay to receive, right?
It's okay to receive.
Ladies, it's okay to receive. It's okay to be served. It's okay to be taken care of, right? All those things that sometimes we have a hard time receiving because we are so used to giving it.
Yeah, I still hadn't learned how to ask for what I needed. that took another 20 years of marriage.
I'm there. So I get it. Yes, I get it. I'm still learning.
He would help, and I mean, he knew that I couldn't do those things, so it was so obvious he did them because, I didn't need to ask because there was no question about it.
Right.
So, but it took me many, many more years to learn to be brave enough to recognize I had a need and ask.
Right.
But, well, back to questions. Is there anything else you want to share with us about how you respond when the guidance doesn't pan out the way you hope?
Okay. So when the guidance doesn't pan out the way I hope, I go back to the person. I go back to the Lord. I go back to God. I go back to who He is, and say, "Hey, Dad," because I see Him as my Father, right? I go to Him and I said, "This is not what I thought it was going to be. You told me to go left. I went left, and now this is what showed up. What is it that you want me to know? What is it that you want me to learn? And if I'm not getting it in that moment, give me the patience." I'm about to get emotional. Teach me how to endure in this particular situation. Guide me on how to persevere so that I can overcome. I think, and He's good and faithful enough to respond to our needs when we need that guidance, and when we are unsure and unsettled, when we are like in the season that we're in right now with the world, right? COVID and racism and prejudice and all these things that are beginning to come to the surface once again. And we're beginning to see it stir in the atmosphere and in the world, and people are unsure, they are unsteady with our nation, they are uncertain, right? This is the perfect time when we go back to our Father who art in heaven, as Jesus prayed, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So Lord, guide us as your children as to what you want us to do. As you see it in heaven, show us and guide us and give us that revelation on how to be better, on how to take care of one another, What is it that you're trying to show us in this season of uncertainty as we don't know what to do? We don't know if we should open schools, if they should stay closed, if we should homeschool, if we should send them out. What should we do? And he's going to be faithful enough to guide us in that situation on how to endure, how to persevere so that we can overcome.
You know, I have thought of it sometimes. He'll send you down a path, and maybe that path has a dead end that is so obvious that it's a dead end,
Right.
but it was the fastest way to say, look, this other path is going to be a right way, even though it's going to have lots of bumps. But since
Right.
you realize that this path was so dead end, you now have the courage to have the patience on the
Absolutely.
other path, you know. And so sometimes, anyway, that's just a thought.
It always leads to greater. It's just in the process of getting there, it's just so much, right? It's like, I know that as a nation, and that's my strong belief, I know that we're going to come out greater and better through it all, but it's just the process of getting there. And that's the enduring, the persevering, and then the overcoming. But it's going to be good. So whatever it is that you're going through, it's once you get through it, the place that you'll end up is going to always be good. I truly believe that.
Yeah. I also know for me, there's been specific times where I knew the answer was, let's say A. And that was the right answer for, say, in January of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but for January 2020, the answer to that exact same question was no
It's
longer
totally different.
Yeah, but it was so A before.
Yeah, that's the difference with seasons, right?
You know, and I'm like,
yeah.
oh, but you said back there, you said that. And it's like, well, that was back then.
That was back then. That's when you were in spring. Now you're in winter. You need a coat. You know, it's going to be different. It's going to be seasons change. It's going to be different.
Yeah, and I thought, I felt abandoned and confused, and I felt mad. I'm like, you said it was okay, you know, and anyway, it was interesting.
Yeah, that's why I love to go back, and that's why prayer is so important. In those moments where it's like you said, this was that we go back and check in with the Lord, that we go back and check in and receive from Him the next steps in the journey and how to be as prepared as we possibly can for whatever is on the journey and whatever we need changes that we need to make on that journey. Because sometimes we pick up things along the way we don't need to pick up. Right? Put that down. You don't need that.
But I like it. I like this rock in my backpack.
No, it's too heavy. The rock is holding you down. Put it down.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
So, fears and doubts. What do you do specifically with those? I mean, the canned answer is give them to God, but okay. What does that look like? What does that sound like? What's going in your mind? What's going in your heart? Some specifics.
Fear and doubt. To me personally, as I have overcome, I've dealt with fear all my life. You want to talk about somebody that has been afraid for the majority of her life? Me. And so what I've learned through the season of when God just took me through that pinnacle season of my life where I was finding who I am in Him, fear needs actionable items in order to move.
Wait, say that one more time.
It needs you need actionable items in order to move past fear. Fear needs action. You cannot move past fear stagnant. If you are afraid, move. So move in the direction of where that fear is holding you from. So let's say if you're afraid to walk down the block because you don't know what's down the block, you have to begin to walk in that direction. That's the only way for me personally, I combat fear, is to go in the direction where the fear is trying to keep me from. So if God is telling me, Casey, I need you to go down this journey, that's where I head, even though fear is telling me you can't do it, you're not smart enough, you're not this enough. I go directly in that direction and pursue that very thing that fear is telling me that I can't do with as much fire and passion as possible. Because once you start putting action to it, you'll begin to see that the fear is the liar, that the fear is not the truth, that that's not who you are. And that's the only reason that I'm here, because I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't a talker. No one knew my gifts and my talents. No one knew that I could write. No one knew any of that because I was so afraid of my own shadow. And so it wasn't until I broke out of that bubble of fear that the Lord began to say, this is where I want you to go. And I began to become obedient to what he said. And I ran in that direction with as much fire, passion, and tenacity as possible. Then I'm a speaker now, and I'm an author now. I'm doing all these things because I ran and I just began to do. So that's how you can escape fear and doubt, is by challenging the very notion that the fear is telling you that you can't. No, I can. With fierceness.
You know, when I saw the ad on Facebook about doing a summit, and I felt like I was drawn to it. Didn't know why, but I'm just like, okay, and I listened to her little hour presentation. But the fear of doing it was like, no, no, no. For me to do the technology aspect and to pay for her coaching and all of that, I'm like, no, I can't do it. And so I did not opt in. Well, 2 weeks later, I see the same ad, and for some reason, my heart's just like drawn to it. I'm like, okay, I'm listening to this lady talk again for an hour of my time.
Right.
And this time she offered free tech support, $500 of free tech support. I'm like, she just took one of my excuses away. And so it's just like, I felt like it was God saying, hey, yes, you're scared to death. Do this. You will get the help that you need. Just do it. But there were, along the journey of doing this, I allowed fear to grip me a handful of times where I just would be frozen. And then I would reach through it and work through it with different tools that I have that help me move forward. But boy, yeah, the fear, moving towards the fear, that's not an easy
It's not an easy task, because fear is telling you, oh, this is bad.
Yes.
Danger.
Yes. Danger. You know how scary this is.
Yeah, it's all a lie. It's all untruth, right?
Yeah.
Fear and doubt is all untruth. And once you begin to understand and learn who you are and where your identity lies, it becomes easier to push past it, right? And the more you push past it, the more you take a step, little steps, right? Little steps work. It's progress. The more you begin to realize, oh, this is not as bad as I thought. Oh, I released that podcast. Oh, that's not that bad as I thought. Here, I can release another one. Oh, and you just keep moving, and you just realize that, wow, this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So apply pressure to fear by taking action.
Thank you. Can you talk into what you mean by trusting God using the power of storytelling?
Oh, man.
Or why is storytelling important to you?
Oh, wow. I love stories. I love stories in all formats. I've always been a reader since a child. So it's no surprising that storytelling would be the thing that he uses in order to encourage me, to empower me, and to equip me with the tools that I need in order to be successful. So words and stories are, I truly believe, one of the greatest ways that as human beings we learn from one another. Look at us now. We're sharing our stories, right? Although our stories may be different, you're hearing our words, you're hearing our testimony of God's greatness and goodness in our lives. And then hopefully that empowers and equips you that, hey, I can do the same. That's the power of storytelling. When I read the Bible, those are all stories, right? From Genesis to Revelation are stories of men and women just like you and me, who were living in a world that had struggle, that had death, that had all these things, but they were able to triumph. right? And so when I pick up the Bible and I read those words of those men and women who were able to triumph in the worst circumstances, and I see that they're able to overcome by, the Lord and Christ in them, and then you begin to say, hey, I can do this too. Or I'm watching a movie and different, I love all types of movies. And one of the movies that I love so much that's sticking out to me right now is The Patriot with Mel Gibson, right? It's about a father who is raising his children all on his own, trying to protect them, trying to keep them safe. And then here's this war that comes to their doorstep. And what does he do? Right? He rises up in the moment and he rises to the challenge and he's able to rise up other men to do the same. It's such an empowering story for us as we watch the movie that, hey, look how he was able to overcome despite all the bad that happened. He lost two sons in the process, but still he was able to overcome. So when you watch different stories and you read different stories and when you see life and see people in front of you with their story, it is such an empowering and encouraging thing. I just love it and it stimulates me. It helps me grow. It gives me examples that I can use as tools in my own life to be greater. If she can do it, I can do it, right? If he can do it, I definitely can do it. And then it pushes you for more.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can't believe 30 minutes is almost up.
Oh my goodness.
So let's see. Is there anything that you want to share with us that might, anything at all, but also specifically any more challenges you faced as you were going forward with, scary things with your creating your Being Eve podcast and how you helped yourself move forward, or anything else that you just have on your heart that you would like to share with us?
I would say the greatest thing that we can do for one another is the sharing of our story. That has been one of the amazing things for me, is to share my story and to listen to others share their story. With Being Eve podcast, the whole platform is designed for women to come and share their story. A lot of time as women, we tend to keep things bottled up, right? We're caretakers. We're taking care of everyone else, and sometimes we leave ourselves on the back burner. And so I wanted to create this platform for women to be able to hear stories from other women on how they were able to overcome their situations, their trials and tribulations, but still be able to be the woman that God designed for them to be. And so other women can tune in, hear these stories. And so I encourage people to share your story, to listen to stories, listen to other stories of men and women who were able to overcome challenges, overcome depression, sadness, pain, and all the suffering that we can endure in this thing called life, because it does help us it unites us knowing that we're not alone. It unites us in knowing that, what, if she went through it, I know that I can overcome that particular situation, and then I can relate to her. And then I know how to love her more, and I know how to be a nicer person, a kinder person, because I understand that we're not the only ones going through. There are other people going through the same hardships, and that connects us all as humans. So I encourage us to meet challenges by sharing our story and being comforters to one another. Like, yes, I went through that. Oh, well, I went through that too. Wow, look, and just being able to just be there for one another by hearing each other and understanding each other as well.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have so much love in my heart for you. I'm just like, oh, I wish I could give you a hug. I'm just you'd be a fun person to hug.
I love hugs too, so that's great.
Oh, gee. Well, I would love to hear about the gift that you have for our audience. Why don't you tell us about
yes, I'm excited about it. So, ladies and gents who are tuning in, the free gift is a free chapter from my book of Being Eve in an Adam's World. The chapter is called A Father's Love. And it's a chapter about Eve's relationship with God. And I encourage you to read it, receive it. There's a reflection piece in there for you all to reflect on the chapter. There's a lesson from Eve to you in there. So it's such an empowering message from a place of, you know what, here's what God had in mind when he created Eve and Adam, and here's what he had in mind when he created you. He wants to be a father to us all, and here's a story about that love. And so that's the chapter. It's called The Father's Love, and that's a free gift for you all today.
I look forward to receiving that and reading that.
Yay.
I am still repairing, not repairing, but I look for opportunities to nurture God's love in me since I felt so abandoned for,
Right.
felt like almost a year I felt abandoned.
Oh, I've been there.
A long time.
I've been there. I've been
Yeah.
there.
Well, sometimes it's even more than a year, but this last time it was.
I've been there, and it feels like you're like so far. You feel fatherless, and I learned that that's when he's the closest. That's when he's the
Yeah,
closest.
yeah, that's a hard paradigm.
It is to understand, right? It is. It is. But it led to the most amazing parts of my journey. So I get it. I get that part where you just feel so alone, but that's when he's the most closest.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we will say goodbye to our audience and
Yay!
thank you for joining us today. I hope
Thank you
you're,
for having me.
oh, yes, 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 absolutely. I look forward to our friendship continuing.
Yes, absolutely.
So, um, for my audience, I hope you have a day filled with love, peace, and laughter. Make it a beautiful, beautiful day. Bye-bye.